Okay, so I posted on the chat, if it's still there, post it again, from Chabad.org on what is the attribute of Malchus. So last week we learned chapter 6, and that is the chapter that discusses Gvura. And this week we're going to learn about Malchus. Now, Malchus is a complicated of known as kingship. Malchus is from the word melech, king, represents the concept of roimimus, of like a king is elevated from the people, and at the same time, it's also shiflus. It has two sides to it. David Melech is the ultimate king. King David is the ultimate king, and King David is the one that says the Anoichi, talks about his humility. Tefillah la'ani is the prayer of David, of King David. So I'm just going to read a bit from the Chabad.org that talks about the attribute of Malchus. So it says like this: the 10th and final Sphira is called Malchut. I'm reading from the Chabad.org that I posted in the chat. The 10th and final Sphira, hey Ariel, the 10th and final Sphira is called Malchut, kingship. Malchut contains two completely opposite qualities called Hisnasut. Hisnasut means exaltedness, to be elevated, like a king. And its opposite, Shiflut. Exalt means to be elevated. Shiflut means shafel, low, meaning humility. In the explanation of the sphere of Keter, we noted, this is Chabad.org is talking, that when we talk about the crown, so the crown is connected to the king, right? The king wears the crown. So with Keter, we noted that the beginning is wedged, the Keter, which is the beginning, which represents the beginning of creation, the thought of creation, is in the concept of the crown, is wedged together with Malchut, the end. Now, what does it mean the beginning is wedged with the end? We say that in the Lichadodi, that Soif Maisa b'machshava tchila. The end action is what the thought was about in the beginning. Meaning that we have, when a person starts on a journey to do something, so you have a thought process. This is what I want to accomplish. And when you think about something, you're thinking about the final product. But to get to the final product, there's many stages in between. There's the preparation, and there's all the components that get you. If let's say you're building a house, your person could draw up the plans, how the house is going to look. Now, there's many parts. You have to buy the raw materials, you have to find the workers, you have to build different parts of the house, they have to build a foundation, the yesod. There's many parts. But what you thought about, the reason that you started on this journey was because you already had an image and an idea clearly in your head of what the final product will be. And that's the connection between Keter. Keter is the beginning of creation, and Malchut. There's many reasons and ways and tools that a person uses in order to fulfill the purpose of creation. You have the attributes of kindness, the attributes of severity. You have all these parts of the person that are made that are the tools how a person is meant to bring fulfillment to the desire and the reason why God created the world. But it has to come down to action. All the potential has to be actualized. Malchut, kingship, why is it exalted? Is because it's connected. It was the initial thought process of why God created the world, is our actions, how we're going to behave, what are we going to do. And why is it shafel? Why is it you have humility? Because all the ways it gets it done is it receives from the other attributes. It could give tzedakah. You give tzedakah because you receive the concept of chesed, kindness, without having the tool, the attribute of kindness, the within yourself. You wouldn't have the know-how or the instinct or the desire to do something kind. Without drawing energy from the concepts of gevura, you wouldn't know how to have boundaries in your life. Without having teferis, you wouldn't understand the concept of beauty. You wouldn't understand the idea of the foundation of yesod, of interaction, of connection. So the Malchus itself has no attributes, but it's the final product. And therefore, it's humble, knowing that in order to get the job done, it has to receive from other places. It has to receive from the other attributes, from the other qualities of the person. But at the same time, it's the highest because that's where it actualizes the purpose of creation. And that's why Malchus is known as, that's why King David, with all the qualities King David had. And he is the king till today. David Melch Yisrael Chai V'Kayom. David is the king, lives forever. He's the humblest of people. because he recognizes within himself that what he has, humility comes from what you have is gifted to you from Hashem. The Rebbe always said that Moshe Rabbeinu was humble, not because he didn't understand his qualities, just because he understood his qualities, but he understood that the qualities were given to him. He was humbled by the mission he was given and the trust that God had in him to be the leader of Israel, knowing that these qualities he had to be a good leader were given to him from Hashem. And that's why Malchus knows that we have to get the job done, and only we could get the job done. But we're humbled to know that the abilities we have and the qualities we have to get the job done have been given to us. So we get the job done. It's Malchus. It's the one that gets it, brings purpose to creation. But we do it in a way of humility. We don't have ego. We're not in your face. It's not about promoting us. The reason the uniqueness of Malchus is that it's the purpose of why Hashem wanted creation, not because we're going to personally benefit from it. And this is what the Ramak, I'm not going to continue reading from the Chabad.org. Each one could read it on their own to understand Malchus a little better. But what I'm going to do, and I'll post the link in the YouTube as well on the bottom. But I'm going to read now we'll understand a little bit what the focus of the Ramak, the Tomar Devorah, which was authored by the Ramak, of what he's focusing, why he focuses so much on humility when it comes to the attribute of kingship. So he says like this, what is Parak Shi? Parak Shi, the 9th parak, is Heich Yargel Adam Atzmai. How should a person get himself used to within the attribute of Malchus, of kingship? So the Ramak says like this, Rishayna Lakulan, number 1. Rishayna means number 1. Shala Yisga Libai. Don't let your heart become full and egotistic. B'chol ashaloi, and with everything that you have, all the blessings that have been given to you from Hashem, whether it's success, a nice family, happiness, all the reasons a person may use as a reason to inflate their own ego, that all these things are helping you inflate yourself. So the Ramak says, "Shelo yiska liba b'chol asher loi." Don't use everything that you have, b'chol asher loi, to inflate your heart, your ego. Let's bring up the English as well. Hold on. Always be in the mindset of a poor person. King David says, Tefillah la'ani kiyatov, the prayer of a poor man. So it says, why? So the commentary over here says, so there's 2 reasons why you could say it. So in general, the reason is that Malchus is always compared to in creation. Malchus today is the 15th of the month, it's Tu B'Shvat. So Malchus is always compared to the moon. The moon has no light of its own. It reflects the light of the sun. How much light we see in the moon is how much reflection it does of the sun. So he says, so that's why he's an ani. What's an ani? An ani has nothing really of his or her own. A poor person has what he or she is given. The more you're given, the more you have, but you're still receiving from outside. You don't have your own source of life, of vitality, of substance. So here he says, like we said before, that Shebizman Agol is specifically not just any time, but specifically the time of exile. Midas Malchusi Nikras Ani. So then the attribute of kingship is on its highest level of connection to the concept of poverty, because the king is in exile. So if we're in a moment of exile, where the king Hashem is in exile because the Shechina Begalusa, a person has no business being in a situation of egotistic. We have to be in the mindset of humility. Never be egotistic, hardy, like it says, from the gifts that Hashem gives you. Even this is the time of Gullus. It's not a time. If you're in the time of redemption of the Beis Hamikdash is one thing, and you should never have ego. It's never time, but specifically in the time of Gullus. Whether you've been given blessed with wealth or wisdom, you always have to have the mindset of humility, of an ani. So he says, Yasam Atzme Tamid Kani. This is very strong Musar. V'yamid atzma lifnei koine kedal, and you should be like a person, stand like a person before his master or her master. Kedal, like a poor person, shoyel mischanen, who asks and pleads and is dependent on the king. So here the Ramak is focusing on the concept of always being in the you have to, it's a very fine line. Some people I'm going to teach this in the way of Chassidus, because some people get lost in in this part that they say, oh, I have to be like an ani. They want to get into the poor person mindset, the humble person mindset, which ends up being counterproductive. If if the effect of it is, you say, I'm a poor person, I can't do anything, I can't accomplish anything, right? How could I think I'm a kind of person who could get something done? I'm going to be a person that's going to inspire others. I'm going to go out there and teach others. I'm going to go out there and give charity to others. Don't count on me for anything. I'm a poor person, right? If a person gets into the mindset of being they use humility as a cover of not being productive and not to contribute to Klal Yisrael, to and creation, that's not humility. That's a cop-out. That's using humility as a way to not contribute. Humility, Moshe Rabbeinu was humble, the humblest of people, and the most powerful of people, the one who took us out of Egypt, the one who gave us the Torah, the one who taught and educated the Jewish people for 40 years in the desert. So it's not an excuse not to be productive. So you have to have that strong balance of the mindset of an ani, but recognizing the blessings Hashem gives you and say, it's not about me. The humility has to be about not taking credit or not inflating your ego, but saying, one second, I have these tremendous tools. I have these tremendous abilities to contribute. So I'm not going to contribute for my sake. Obviously, I was given it like Malchut receives. I'm going to contribute it for others. If Hashem gave me a gift, how could I help someone else? How could I teach someone else? How could I inspire someone else? How could I help someone else with material as well? So he says, you should stand before your creator like a dal shoyel, a poor person who's asking and pleading. But when you receive and Hashem gives, then you recognize you have to have that tension of humility with productivity. And he's focusing more on the humility. That means that in order to be productive in a healthy way, you have to have a foundation of humility, and that's what the Ramak is going to focus on. That's the focus of Musar. So the Ramak says, get yourself accompanied, be used to. That should be your mindset of the mindset of a person who's shoyel and mischanen, asking and pleading. Even if you're a very wealthy man or a wealthy woman. That person has to realize that why am I going to feel egotistic because I have wealth? Wealth comes and goes. Means when you're not connected, it means a person's not about when you ask, the mindset of asking, what the Ramak is saying. It's not because you have to pretend like you don't have and not be grateful. Very grateful. Hashem gives you. But don't be, okay, so I have, so why am I asking? You have now, you may not have later. Hashem gives you the koiches, the abilities to do something. You always never take it for granted. Always appreciate. I think the focus over here is the appreciation and the mindset, and therefore the lack of self, of it's about me, but how Hashem has given me the power to do and be productive. So he says, I feel you have money. You have wealth. It doesn't have to be physical money. Wealth is, you could have wealth of wisdom, wealth of talents, wealth of abilities, wealth of inspiration. It doesn't attach itself like as if you have it, take it for granted. You always need Hashem's compassion, that Hashem makes you part of the story, part of what someone who could contribute. He says, what's the difference between a person who has and doesn't have? The question is, how much do you have? A poor person has less, but it's all a question of what Hashem gives you. He says, "V'hari ein hevdel ein ani l'asher." In the translation, he says, "There's no difference between the poor and the rich man." El shel asher yesh ksas yoseh kesem yani. So the poor person has more money than the rich person. The rich person has more money than the poor person, and therefore he has bread and he has other things. He has health. Maybe someone doesn't have health, but it doesn't. It's not. There's no certainty that you're going to have it all the time, and therefore v'yachnia levavai v'yani atzmoi. And he says you should yachnia, you should subdue your heart and get into the mindset of a poor man. Again, you have to be very careful with this idea. It's not about, because a person could use this as a cover for lack of productivity. It's not and becoming what do you mean? I need. How could I give? But you do it in a way that means don't take for granted what you've been given. And specifically when you daven, he says, when a person davens, don't be like a person who davens. Says, well, I'm a rich man, I'm a smart man, I'm a respected man or woman. But have humility. Humility is very important, especially when you daven. It's a special segula, special remedy. He says why? In the commentaries, he says, specifically when a person prays. You have to be like a poor person who's asking and pleading. There's nothing like the prayer of a poor man. It says, the poor man's prayer goes beyond the name of Hashem. So again, when you have ego, so you're here and God's there. When you're a person that doesn't look at yourself as you have, even if you have, but it's not about you. It means the difference between a person who has the mindset of a healthy ani, of a healthy poor person, a healthy mindset of a poor person, and the one person who has the mindset of I'm a rich person. Again, it doesn't have to be money, rich in whatever the richness is that when you're rich, so and you view it about yourself, so you separate yourself. A poor person is lacking anything. It means even when you have a lot, it was gifted to you. And when you have that mindset, so you say, why was it gifted to me? So how could I help? How could I contribute? So he continues, he says, and the opposite of a person who has humility, it says, when a person's heart becomes ram, elevated, of ego, you start to forget about Hashem, right? It's me. You're going to insult me. You're not going to give me respect. You're not going to talk nicely to me. You know who I am. So what happens? All the blessings that God gives you is only a way to inflate. It's fuel for your own ego. But when a person has the mindset of a poor person, but the heart of the most giving person, and the mindset of also of the most giving person, so then the more blessing you have, the more you see yourself as a person who could accomplish something. So he says, when does a person start to forget about Hashem, forget about why God blessed you? The external, he calls it external forgetfulness, is when a person has ego. But David and King David, he said, King David was very much into humility. Sha'amar, he says, Ki yachid v'ani ani, I'm alone and then a poor person. Here, we're not talking about a poor person, we're talking about the king who is the king of all the Jewish people, but he never took it, he never made it about himself. He was able to have clarity. King David went through many hard challenges in his life. Many times when a person could lose themselves. And the proof is that the generations after King David lost themselves. No, if God wanted to tell a king, or the Torah tells us about a king that was close to King David, the Torah says, Ki David Aviv. He was like David, his father. And doesn't say that about a lot of the kings. There are many kings that didn't fit the description like David, his father, meaning his forefather. Because David, at the highest level, he was challenged with many challenges that a lot of people would lose themselves. But how did he stay focused? Is because he had the mindset of an ani. So when his sons, not just one son, when his sons rebelled against him, when the people closest to him tried to destroy him, when his father-in-law chased him to kill him, everyone was out to get David HaMelech. Nevertheless, who's the king that we remember till today is King David? Because he had that focus of the humility of an oni, of a poor person. He never took it personal. It never tripped him up in what he has to do. So no matter if his son rebelled or his father not tried to kill him or his best advisors were trying to kill him, unseat him. He had challenges in his own wife, and he had many challenges. King David did not have an easy life. But he's the he's the author of Tehillim. He prepared the Beis Hamikdash. The commitment that God had to the Jewish people is with King David, that David is going to come back. There's going to be a descendant of David, that's the Mashiach. So King David but where did he get this? What was the tools that he had? What was the strategy he had? Because he had the mindset of an Ani. And therefore he was always able to stay focused. So Shahare Kol Anche Beisa, all the members of a person's household, Kol Echad Ve'echad, Sarich La'ezer La'atzmim B'Kadosh Baruch Hu Ma Kulam Elav. Here the Ramah goes even deeper. Goes back to the person. Because no matter who you have in your life, your family, your children even, everyone needs something from Hashem. So how could you, at the end of the day is, if you're going to rely on this person or that person, everyone at the end of the day needs to come onto Hashem. So don't think that you could build yourself a fortress of your security within yourself and say, I don't need Hashem. I don't have to recognize Hashem. Baruch Hashem, I have financial security, I have family security. You don't know where the vulnerability is. Even your wife and children. When the day of judgment comes, when Hashem comes and it says, what have you done? What have you accomplished in your life? You're not going to be able to find the security of anyone else. There's no amount of money in your bank account that's going to help you. How much tzedakah you gave, that's going to help. How much charity you gave, how much help you gave to other people, that's going to help. How much Torah you helped give, sponsor, that's going to help. How much Torah you studied, how many mitzvahs you did, that's going to help. But all the material things you gathered, the things that you gathered that are not part of Torah mitzvahs, those are not going to count for anything when it comes to the day of judgment. You're not going to be able to rely on even your closest kin. You can't say, well, where's my son? I need my son. I need my wife with me in this. I can't sit judgment without my wife. Well, it doesn't work like that. God judges you as an individual, the Ramak says. When a person passes away, everything only goes till the grave. After the grave, you're alone. After the gate, after the door of the grave, he calls. It's an amazing thing. The Ramak calls the grave the door. Why is it called the door? Because you enter you leave the world, and from there you go to the world to come, to the Garden of Eden, the world of the afterlife, and the entrance for the world of afterlife. That's why we take Jewish burial so seriously. The entrance to the afterlife is through the grave. So he says, up until the grave, up until the door of this world, you have a lot of you could think you could rely on a lot of things, but once you enter the door of the next world, then you're on your own. And what is it going to help if you're going to? So what are all your ego? What are all the things that bloated you? What are they going to do for you then? It doesn't make a difference. Therefore, have humility and spend your time in this world properly. So when you go to the world to come, he's talking about the person who's conscious about the world to come. When you go to the world to come, you don't come empty-handed. Therefore, he says it's very important to set yourself right in the attribute of humility of kingship. Again, why is humility in kingship? It's not just that represents the concept of humility. In the place where you have to see what kind of person you are, is the question that is Malchus. Malchus is where all your potential comes to the question. What is it now? So you have a kind heart, and you have discipline, and you have beauty, you have Torah. But what does it mean practically? In the practical, that's Malchus. Malchus takes all the potential you have and brings it into interaction. And therefore, when it comes to the place of interaction, you have to be very smart, in the right way of how to be, what kind of person you're going to be. Are you going to be a person that contributes? Are you going to be a person that focused on tachlis, on bottom line, and doing Hashem's will? or you're going to be trying to build up your reserves of things. But then he says, what do the reserves help you when it comes to the moment when it comes to the moment of truth? You can't tell the courts, well, look at my bank account, look how much, look what I did with my life, look how much money, look how many stocks and real estate I own. I don't believe that's God doesn't say. So what did you do with it? Did you help an institution? Did someone else benefit from it? Did someone have food on their table for Shabbos because of it? And what are you showing me? So I'm going to go a little bit further. He says, Oid Shniya, another idea he says, is Pirish B'Sefer HaZohar V'Yichshuv HaMa'od. The next thing that the Ramak is going to talk about is the idea of exile. It was a concept, especially in the times of the Ramak. It's brought down over here that the Ramak was a person that went many times on his own into exile. Those days, today we don't find it so much, at least by choice, that a person chooses to go into exile. But in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, the times of the Alter Rebbe, the times of the Ramak, it was very much part of a life of a person to leave their comfort because their home, the people that know them. Sometimes you could have a very special person, a big rabbi, or a big, like the Ramak was a huge Kabbalist. But if you traveled, especially those days, the roads, no one knows who you are, then they look at you like a poor person, and you just walk around, you get treated like a regular poor person. And that's called Gullus. People it was very customary to go through experiences, whether it was a few weeks, a few months, a few years, that people would go on Gullus. They would leave their comfort, leave their familiar space, and go into places where no one knew them and treated them no different than anyone else. And that was a way of experiencing what it means for Hashem to go into Gullus, right? Hashem comes in the exile, no one knows God, right? In the base of Mikdash, everyone was bowing to God. All of a sudden, when Hashem says, "What did you put on tefillin today?" When Hashem says, "What's going on? Are you keeping Shabbos? Are you eating kosher?" You say to Hashem, "Who are you? You're someone else. You're another idea over here." So God's in Gullus. So in order to understand and appreciate what it means to go to Gullus, what it means that God's in Gullus, no one recognizes you, no one pays attention to you. So people would go with themselves into Gullus, into exile. It says, another thing that's brought down, and it's very important. And that is, hey Beth, that is, a person should put themselves into an experience of exile for the sake of Hashem. Like I said, for a person themselves to experience what it means to be in an unfamiliar space. When you go into exile, you're in an unfamiliar space. And you want to be a chariot, a person that could appreciate what's mean a chariot, to really understand what it means for Hashem. That when Hashem is in Golus, and like I said, what does Golus mean? He's in unfamiliar place. What's unfamiliar places? No one recognizes him. Who's God? Like, you want me to do Torah mitzvahs? Okay, so you're another idea that's out there. And you have to say that I'm in exile, and my vessels have gone into exile with me. Take with you, he says, whatever you have is also, it's in Golus, it's in exile. Like Hashem went to exile. The vessels of the temple, like we spoke in the previous class, are in exile. And what about Hashem that went into exile and doesn't have, at least when you go into exile, you still have your coat and your food. Even if you're not recognized, you're unfamiliar, but God's Golus, God's exile is even more hard, more challenging. The God's lacking even his vessels that he had from the temple when he's in exile. He has nothing. He has no way to express himself. He's dependent, when a person goes into exile, you become totally dependent on the people around you. Hashem's dependent that someone should recognize Hashem. And he says, he describes what does it mean to go into Golus. That you should have limited things. When you go into exile, don't say, okay, well, I'm going to exile. Let me take my checkbook and my different credit cards and my fancy watch and my laptop and my iPad. Right after I'm going into exile, but I'll go fully loaded. He says you don't have to go fully loaded. The vessels go into exile. A person has to, when they go into Golus, this is not something that's really practiced so much today. But when a person goes into self-inflicted exile, it should be in a way that you should submit your heart. It means don't go, go with a humble heart. and spend that time viskasher b'Torah, connect to Torah. We'll talk a little bit in a second. What would that mean today about going into exile? Well, and then God accompanies you, right? What would happen when they used to travel into exile? They'd go in a group of chevra would go together. So God, when you meet the group and you fit the description, so you could go along with the group. God's in exile. You have to fit the description. You can't come in with your fancy goods and say, I'm in exile. Exile means you go through you go through experiences of humility. Exile doesn't exist really, that people leave their homes willingly and go away for 2-3 years in unfamiliar space. But the idea is to get into a mindset of exile sometimes get into the mindset of humility, of being in unfamiliar places, you're almost at people's mercy, so to say, for doesn't maybe not for charity, but for recognition. You have no background to stand on. If you want to make an impression on someone, you have to give them your best shot. Sometimes, a person says, "Oh, I know this guy. This guy used to learn in the yeshiva. This guy was a big rabbi. I'm going to listen to what he has to say or she has to say." Or I have your credit gives you credit. Your past credit gives you credibility. But here we're saying when you go into exile, you have to give your best pitch every time. If you have something to contribute, you have to try now. You can't fall back on what you've once done. You can't fall back on what your parents did. If you have something to contribute, give something. If you don't have something to contribute, be quiet. And therefore, the moment when a person goes into exile, into self-inflicted exile, the idea of it is that every moment is a created moment. You see something, you take an opportunity to contribute something, and it may be more difficult for you to be effective. But the process of the refinement that you go through as an individual by having to go through that experience sharpens who you are. Brings focus, right? If you have to give a fresh, if you one of the things you have a resume is when a person has a resume for a job is you say where you worked before. Oh, this person had an executive job in this company. So right away, the person who's interviewing you knows your past credit. And therefore, it's much easier for you to get a wanted job. Imagine you had an interview as if it was your first interview. You never had a job before. You don't have 20 years of success behind you that the person should consider you for the job. That imagine the interview this is your first interview. You never had a job. You're totally at the person's mercy if they're going to allow you to be part of this team. So too, when a person goes into self-inflicted exile, the idea that the Ramak is promoting, in those days it was actually, but today it's the same idea, is to give your shot, give your pitch to life without any background, without any past experience. You're just a fresh person who walked into town. And if you view yourself that way, sharpen yourself, as if right now this is your first pitch. You don't have nothing to fall back on. It's not like you've already said so much and you've already done so much. So therefore, people already have respect for you and already understand you. Imagine you had to repitch your life again. That's what exile is, repitching your life. So he says, "V'skasher b'Torah, v'aschin imo," and then God is with you. What does it mean to go into exile? Get out of your comfort. Menuchase means your comfort space. Tamid kederch shahayim iskar Reb Shimon v'chaveri v'ais b'Torah. Reb Shimon, the great Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, they would leave their place of comfort to go study Torah. Get out of your familiar space, your place that you feel secure, to be able to be in a place of vulnerability. And this is not so much practice today. A lot of times people want a safe space to be able to work out of to find themselves in a comfortable place. But here the Ramak is promoting, go out there and expose yourself to the environment a bit. See, rough it up a bit. Not physically, but rough it up in trying to find yourself. He says, and if you're going to walk in those days, you're going to move from place to place, not with this horse and buggy, not with vehicles, again, things that you have. You're 2 feet, you're coming alone. You're walking in, this is what you see is what you get. Don't look in the driveway to see what kind of car I showed up in. That doesn't mean nothing. I didn't come in any car, I took the bus. There's nothing about me that you're going to know. You want to have to hear what I have to say. This is who's here in front of you. It says, I love them. This is what it says, Sivrei al Hashem Elekov Pirish by Lashon Shever Shu Mishaber. A person is broken. A broken body is a body who goes through exile. So I'm going to stop here because we're going to continue next week with Malchus. And the idea of Malchus again is not humility that is an excuse to not be productive. If you get rid of all the fanfare and it's like you get down to the bare bones and get away from ego and comfort and acceptance. Malchus is about a person like King David who has so much to give, but is yet so focused and so humble, and the humility sharpens and focuses the person to be able to be the most productive. When we're in this world, we've been given a lot of gifts from Hashem. We could get lost in the gifts. Don't get lost in the gifts that Hashem gives you. Use the gifts and recognizing that you've been given to you for so you could be productive. And sometimes you go through experiences to sharpen that. Sometimes you go through you get uncomfortable to sharpen that. And you have nothing. Sometimes you have nothing to fall back on. And it's going to be your first impression. If you imagine every day you had to make a first impression, how sharper you would be, how more focused you would be, and how much on top of your game would be. All right, everyone. If there's any questions, now is the time to ask. Otherwise, we shall see you guys at next class. Laila Tov, take care.